Well, I don't have any milk and bread in my home. And I'm not real sure if you don't, there's a good possibility of you getting some.
That's right. It's too late now.
Yeah, it is. Panic has reigned supreme. Good afternoon. I'm Rick Gilbert along with Joel Harbinson. And hey, we're not only on the radio and online, but we are streaming on the Harbinson, Brixey, and Corbett Facebook page. Actual audio and video. So
That's right.
I'm waving. There we go.
And Anna Harris is here, my paralegal, who's the executive producer of this production.
That's right.
Today. So
yeah,
we thought we would do something that's a first. I reckon a first for the radio station. Would you think that? Have you ever had another thing go live on video while you're doing radio? Of course, you know you can see both of us. We've got faces made for radio and voices made for print.
Well, hey, I'm no stranger to video, but normally it can't be broadcast.
That's right. That's true.
Now, sticking with today's theme, anything I say can and will be used against me.
And has been.
Many times.
That's right.
And some of it is true, but on a more serious bent, we are talking about the Fifth Amendment.
That's right, and today's the 5th, so not what more appropriate time to talk about the Fifth Amendment than the 5th day of the new year.
Well, I'm going to tell you what I know about the Fifth Amendment, which isn't much.
Okay.
But when I was a little boy, I watched Dragnet. And Gannon and Friday would always recite that. Actually, it's Miranda, right?
It's Miranda, based on a court decision named Miranda.
I learned a lot of things.
And what did they advise? So they said, cuff him down. What did they say?
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one, one will be appointed to you, etc., etc.
Bingo. Okay?
That's it.
So that is the Fifth Amendment. But you notice that they only informed them after they had arrested them. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so that's a different situation. So,
all right, let me ask you, when should they inform them?
Well, they don't have to, other than what you're saying. Miranda is the case that reflects the Fifth Amendment.
It was in Arizona, if I recall, I think.
That is correct.
See, I've watched a lot of these
versus Miranda, and that's what people are familiar with. They just don't realize that they have that right prior to being arrested as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Miranda applies if you're in a custodial situation and being interrogated.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're cuffed and arrested, you're in a custodial situation. That's the first time law enforcement has to inform you of your rights, because if they don't inform you and you're in custody and they ask you questions and you admit a crime or something of that nature, they can't use that against you unless you've been properly Mirandized.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, prior to that time, and what this is based on is several weeks ago, I put a video on Facebook on the office page where I talked about a person's Fifth Amendment rights before they could be arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, the Constitution, we know that's something that was done, of course, at a time when our Founding Fathers didn't particularly like the government. They didn't like
That's true.
the church. They didn't like England.
The Church of
They
England.
didn't like the Church of England, so therefore we have the First Amendment, which says you have the right to practice what religion you want. We have the right to assemble, protest if you want to, or assemble at Walmart to get milk and eggs or bread or anything else.
Listen, the only real necessity during a winter storm is toilet tissue. That's everything else is
that could
optional.
be. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if that rises to the level of being a right.
No,
But it's certainly a privilege.
it absolutely is that.
So we were, of course, remember our Constitution written in 1789 by our forefathers, broken from the Church of England, the government of England, where at that time you could be tortured by the government of England until you confessed. whether that was true or not. Generally, people who are tortured will admit to anything. So when we formed this country, we said, we're not going to have that. We're not going to make somebody incriminate themselves. And over time, just exactly as you pointed out, that's what it's come down to with the Fifth Amendment. So what I was bringing out in my video was just in traffic stops, particularly when somebody is suspected of impaired driving, a person has rights at those times as well. They have rights in their home from the Fourth Amendment to an unreasonable search, okay, that the government can't do, have a right to an attorney that Miranda talks about, which is the Sixth Amendment, and then the one, and I have received some criticism for people saying, well, you're trying to frustrate law enforcement. That's exactly what our forefathers wanted to do with the government. We were the first country in the time of civilization who reserved rights that we, the people, kept from the government. Usually when you form the government say, okay, now we're telling you what you have. But when we did the Declaration of Independence, you remember Thomas Jefferson said we have the unalienable right given to us by our Creator to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So when they, 13 years later, or 1789, were writing the Constitution, they said, well, we need to be more specific. Okay, so that's when they wrote our Bill of Rights. They wrote the Constitution, and then later said, well, I don't think we're specific enough. In fact, Thomas Jefferson said that. So we need to amend it or change it by making sure we put in a series of things that we're going to call the Bill of Rights. First Amendment, that was the First Amendment. They thought it was so important that we had the right to practice religion or not practice it if we so choose, right to assemble, right to free speech to criticize the government, Fourth Amendment to be safe from unreasonable searches, because they had experience in England, the government coming in and just tearing your house out for no reason to search for whatever they wanted to do. But one thing they did was the Fifth Amendment, which was the right not to incriminate yourself. So that's where the founding fathers thought it was so important to do that. So I received some criticism, but when we think about our government, we balance two interests. One is we want laws that are enforceable. We have law enforcement officers. If we didn't have law and didn't have law enforcement, we'd have anarchy. People do whatever they wanted to do. Okay? But on the other hand, our founding fathers said, well, we're going to reserve in the people certain rights that rise to a constitutional level, and because we don't want tyranny. So we don't want the government.
That's why we left England.
That's right.
Why we left Europe.
Exactly. So you balance out these two things. So you have people who may consider themselves more law-abiding, law and order type people, whereas lawyers like me who are bound to honor the Constitution. And I brought with me, because it's been 38 years, my oath, not my actual oath that I did, but the one, well, it's not the one signed by me, but the one that every attorney now has to do. And you'll notice that when President Trump is sworn in, the first thing that you have to swear is that you'll support the Constitution of the United States. Right. They don't say, will you support enforcing the law or what? They say, I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, so help me God. That's the first thing I swore to become an attorney. So we balance, because, again, if you have the government, and the government is reflected in law enforcement officers. We certainly want them. We certainly appreciate them. Again, it'd be anarchy without them. But at the same time, we have certain rights that we reserved from the government and said, well, we're going to reserve these rights so you can't ever take them away. You can put regulations on them, just like First Amendment free speech. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, okay? If you want to have freedom of speech by having a street preacher on the street, you can say what days and times maybe you can regulate it that way. So no constitutional right's absolute. But, you know, one constitutional right that I guarantee you everybody in this county would just go crazy if somebody would say, well, don't use that right, would be the Second Amendment.
I know where you're going with it.
Okay. So if you feel like that you have a right to the Second Amendment, then you certainly have a right to the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment.
Yep.
All those rights are yours. You may choose not to invoke them, but you have those particular rights, and people ought to be informed of that, and that's why I did the video that did that. And if you think that a person prior to arrest doesn't have the right to remain silent, then here's what you can do. I want you to bring all your guns to my office. I will take them. I'll be glad to. I'll give you something to sign saying you don't think the Second Amendment is important enough, so you're going to give me all your guns. I will particularly appreciate AR-15s, AK-47s, a couple of Glocks.
You can sell them for
I will keep some, sell some, but so you know those rights go hand in hand. So don't say on one hand, oh, I want to keep my Second Amendment rights, but you should not use your Fifth Amendment rights because that interferes with law enforcement. Well,
yeah,
there's a balance.
He is Joel Harbinson of Harbinson, Brixey, and Corbett Attorneys at Law here in Taylorsville. This is a program that we do a couple times a month, and today we're talking about your rights. This is free information, and we've learned a lot on these shows. And let's do a hypothetical. I know you did the traffic stop. Let's do one. Okay, I am on the way home, and
in your hypothetical, let's say I'm sitting next to you, you're driving.
They're going to pull us on a bag.
They're going to pull us. They're going to pull us. But as we get through it, they're not going to get anything out of it. Let's say
all right.
I'm sitting there next to you, okay?
All right.
You've decided you needed to take a lawyer everywhere you went.
Okay.
Okay? So you're driving home, I'm sitting next to you. Take it from
All
there.
right. I'm driving home from here this evening. And although I haven't caught it yet, everyone around me has this crud, whatever it is.
Right.
I am on a combination of antihistamine and antibiotics, and I have taken a Viagra.
Okay.
And I have had some sort of
I may get out of the car about now.
I have some sort of foul reaction. It's causing me to weave in and out of traffic.
Yes, that could happen.
I am pulled by a highway patrol officer, and I am cooperative with this law enforcement officer in that I keep my hands on the wheel and all of that, but I feel that I am not impaired.
Correct.
What should I do?
Okay, that's a very good hypothetical. Let me tell you what your rights are. Okay, and you alluded to this real well. And that is if you are stopped. And the first thing that ought to be your concern, and is the concern of the officer, is that nobody has any guns that you're going to shoot the officer with. So you do exactly what you said. I would say, Rick, put your hands up on the steering wheel. I don't care if it's for a stop sign. Put your hands up on the steering wheel to let them know.
That's a good rule of thumb.
That they are safe. You don't have a gun. I mean, that's for your benefit, but it's for theirs too, because you don't know what you're going to get when you pull up to the car.
They deserve that peace of mind.
Oh, sure. I mean, hey, law enforcement are some of the best people I know. They come from some of the best families. They have the best families. They have every right to be protected at all and be safe in their job. We want them enforcing the law.
Yes.
So we put our hands on the steering wheel. At that time, the officer will come up to Rick and say, I want to see your driver's license and registration. Well, those are two things, again, that even though an absolute reading of the Fifth Amendment would be, no, I'm not going to give them to you. By the privilege of driving a vehicle, courts have said that the officer is entitled to see who you are with your driver's license and see that you're capable and have a license to drive, and your car registration or vehicle registration, because they have a right to know if you've stolen that vehicle.
Yes.
So you would hand them the registration and your driver's license. Okay. Now, if it's if they were just stopping you for speeding,
Mm-hmm.
or for running a stoplight or something of that nature, they don't need any information out of you because they saw you do it. They clocked you on the radar.
Right.
They saw you do the stop sign or stoplight. They don't need anything from you. And usually there's not a conversation. They go back, write the ticket.
Bring it to you and say,
Right,
have a nice day.
Exactly, and that's what it. If they go beyond and say, Mr. Gilbert, have you been drinking?
No.
Well, okay. At that point, it becomes an investigation, and that's where your Fifth Amendment rights come in.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to, at that time, answer any question or do anything. Now,
Okay.
whether you choose to do that is a different story.
Right.
You do not have to do anything. I'll tell you what you do have to do. They will then tell you to get out of the car. You have to get out of the car. There was a case, Pennsylvania versus Mims, years ago that says, again, for the officer's safety, he can direct you to get out of the car just to see if you have access to any gun or anything. And that makes sense.
I am obligated to get out of the
You
vehicle.
are obligated to get out of the vehicle.
Okay.
Okay. But at that point, your rights kick in, should you so choose to use them, where you don't have to do anything else.
Let's say they want me to walk the.
They will ask you first, have you taken anything? What's that Miranda right? You have a right to what?
Remain
You
silent.
have a right to remain silent. Okay, so at that point, you have a right to remain silent. Mr. Gilbert, would you care to do some walking tests for us? Let's see, what's that right again? You have the right to remain. Anything you say or do
Mm-hmm.
can be used against you.
Right.
Okay, so really at that point, there's nothing else you have to do.
And in that case, me refusing to do the field sobriety test
Right.
is in no way an admission of guilt.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is absolutely correct. In fact, the Fifth Amendment says, and if you try in a case like I do, the judge will read the law to the jury and say the defendant, if they've chosen not to testify, has not testified in this case. They have a right under the Fifth Amendment not to testify if they choose to do so.
Mm-hmm.
You are not to draw any inference whatsoever from them not testifying. So that's how thorough our Fifth Amendment rights are. People just don't think about them when they're out there driving on the road. Again, there are certain things you have to do, but at that point, you're done. They may ask you, can I search your vehicle then? I would suggest that in that particular situation, you have a right not to consent. They may go ahead and do it, okay?
Now, let me make sure I understand this. Okay, they're going to ask me to search my vehicle. I am not bound to allow them to do so. Is that correct?
No. If they are going to search your vehicle, they're going to do it without your consent. What you have a right to is not consent to the search.
Okay.
They may do it anyway. And then it's a question, as all these issues are, for the courts to decide where does law enforcement and where do the rights intersect and what takes priority. So it could be that their search is not valid. They did not have probable cause to search your vehicle, and under those circumstances they wouldn't. But they may find something, may arrest you for it, but at court it may be thrown out because they have violated your Fourth Amendment rights from an unreasonable search.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore that's how the rights interplay with the law enforcement responsibilities that law enforcement officers have. Now let me make one point clear. Don't ever, under any circumstances, resist an officer. just because you have a right to remain silent doesn't give you the right to do anything to be combative with them. Oh, I've got my rights, I've got this. You be totally cooperative in the sense of not resisting if they do arrest you.
Mm-hmm.
That's for your benefit as well as theirs.
Sure.
I have never suggested and never would to anybody to be combative with an officer. They are doing their job. Most do it real well. But at the same time, what you don't want to do is to necessarily give them your consent to search, your consent to incriminate yourself by maybe you getting out of the car and not doing so well on the one-legged stand,
Mm-hmm.
or not doing well on the finger to nose. They're doing their job, and their job is to investigate, and they investigate by asking you questions, which you have a right to remain silent, and they they further their investigation by having you to do roadside tests. Again, none of which you have to do. The only thing that ever comes into play that has some bearing or some consequence for not doing, and again, this is where the courts have balanced out your right to not incriminate yourself with the law,
Mm-hmm.
and that is if they take you in and then offer you an intoximeter or an intoximeter, again, depending on where you live and how you pronounce it.
Tomato.
Yeah, that's right. The what we call a breathalyzer at the station. If you refuse that, then you can lose your license for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you refuse,
that one,
okay.
the portable one at the scene, the Alka-Sensor is what normally called,
Mm-hmm.
does not have consequences. Now, here's something that comes into play that I find a lot with people. One is they're intimidated by officers. Everybody is. Person's there with the badge, they got a gun. They stopped you, they have authority, you're generally intimidated. So most people are never going to exercise their Fifth Amendment rights because they're just too intimidated to do it. Okay?
Some people really, really should.
Well, I mean, we decided in this society by our founding fathers, or they decided, that we have these rights regardless of whether we're involved in illegal activity or not, to be quite honest about it. Those are the rights that we have, regardless of the circumstances.
I'll give you another little jewel here. And this isn't the Fifth Amendment. I'm going to get off the tracks just for a second, but I want to mention this because it came to mind when you were mentioning what you just mentioned. If you are arrested for whatever, and they are taking you to a court proceeding, and a newspaper or a television or a radio reporter comes up to you with a microphone and asks you a question on the way, it's not your Fifth Amendment, but shut up. That's my advice to you, and I'm a reporter, and I go to some perp walks, not very often, but you do see people who, in the court of public opinion, put a noose around their neck.
It's the old Ron White, the comedian, says, you had the right to remain silent, you just didn't have the ability. And I had a case years ago, and of course didn't get the case until after this had happened when they appointed me to represent this person. And I'm not sure what he did, but anyway, he was brought in, and Steve Onasorge or somebody said, well, did you do it? And he said, well, yeah, and if you do the crime, you got to do the time. Okay, so what are my options then as an attorney when he's on Channel 9 in front of millions and it's videotaped?
And the
saying,
prosecutor,
yeah, I did
and the prosecutor can and will use that.
Of course. I mean, they have situations all the time. But what I was getting to on the side of the road is, and this is a Supreme Court case, they have a right to lie to you. Officers have the right to lie to you in their interrogations. And I'll tell you how that generally works. Several ways. One is they may bring two people in for questioning. Of course, they don't have to answer the Okay, but they'll bring them in for questioning. Both, they'll have them in separate rooms. And then they won't get anything out of either one. And then they'll go to one and say, your buddy just told us what happened. We don't need to talk to you anymore. We're gonna go ahead and charge her. And so the person goes, well, he ratted on me. Let me tell you what really happened. Okay, the Supreme Court says that's a legitimate interrogative technique to use. Now, how it's done on the side of the road is they may tell you, well, you have to do these field sobriety tests. You have to do them. Okay. They have every right to tell people that. That's not the law. You have to take see this portable alcohol sensor? You have to take this or we're going to arrest you. That ain't the law, okay? That's something that they're doing to try to get you to do something, okay?
Okay.
So again, if you feel strongly about that the law is the law and that everybody should cooperate in everything, whether it hangs them or not, then that's fine, that's your opinion. I was sworn as a lawyer to uphold the Constitution. The Constitution gives you certain rights. I'm telling you what they are. Again, if you don't like certain constitutional rights like the 5th, then give me your guns under the 2nd. I'll take them. I'll take the Rugers. I'll take the Remington rifles. I'll be glad to do that. But we all have those particular rights. And I'm going to give you a little present today, Rick, because I'm not going to be with you all the time when you're driving.
Probably not.
Okay? What I had made are business cards that you simply have on the back of them your rights.
My Fifth Amendment.
And
right.
you can simply hand, if you so choose to do it, anytime you're stopped, a card that says, I hereby invoke these rights.
I like this.
My right to remain silent so that I'm not going to do any test, I'm not going to answer any question. My right to have an attorney, I'd like to call mine now. On the other side is my cell phone, Rick, so you can do that. And then also I have a right to unreasonable search and seizure, therefore I'm not consenting to any search you may ask to. So I can't be there with you, Rick, but if you want to use those rights, you can. Now, they're still going to, and I gave you several, and I'll tell you where I would put them, okay? I'd put 2 in my wallet, 1 right next to my driver's license, so when you're reaching for your driver's license, you got it there that you can hand. And if you're thinking, man, I took this NyQuil and stuff, and maybe I shouldn't have, but I really, and you know, prescription medicine or any kind of medicine is not a defense on an impairing substance.
And that's what the law enforcement is running into now with all these opioids and these painkillers.
Yes.
And hey, I've got a prescription. Doesn't matter.
It does not matter, whatever. It doesn't matter if you're doing the NyQuil type thing that you said you were doing.
Impairment is impairment is impairment. But, I think William Shakespeare said that.
Exactly. Again, under these circumstances, you have a right not to hang yourself, because if you cooperated with them, then they would ask you, what'd you have? Well, I had NyQuil. Okay. Well, let me do some tests. You do all the tests. They mark how poorly you do, and then they're going to form an opinion. You were impaired, and then you're charged, and we go to court, and then the judge may find that you were impaired from that. All based on you cooperating with them by not invoking your 5th Amendment rights. Now, if you, like I say, if you live in a society where you think that everybody charged with a crime or everybody ought to cooperate in every way, that's fine. That's not really America, but that's fine. You have a right. I reckon you have a First Amendment right to feel that way regardless. But, you know, again, as an attorney, I'm sworn to uphold the Constitution. That's in the Constitution. That's what the Constitution means in daily life. You decide whether or not you want to use your constitutional rights or not.
Hey, this was fun. We're out of time, and I'm going to keep these cards. I'm going to give some to my friends. I got a few.
Put 2 in your wallet.
I got it, but
put 1 with your car registration.
Okay.
And put 1 at your front door and 1 at your back door. Because if they come and say, Rick, we're going to search your house, you say, I got something for you.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I am a cooperative son of a gun when I'm around cops.
Well,
and I respect them. I
Of
work
course.
with them. I like them. They're my friends. And I don't have anything, regarding if people don't believe this, I don't really have anything to hide.
Well, and that's what everybody says. Well, I don't have anything to hide. That's fine.
Yeah.
Whether you do or not,
Yeah.
those are your rights. And again, there's certainly every purpose for law enforcement. We've got to have good law enforcement.
Yeah.
We got to enforce the laws. At the same time, we're balancing what our rights are under the Constitution, and sometimes those don't match up well.
That's right.
Okay? So you pick and choose what you want to do.
Thank you, Anna, for being the executive producer today. Have a good evening, everyone. I hope that the winter storm is not as severe.
Yeah,
as,
and
it might be.
don't you take any medicine before you go home, because I can't ride with you.
Have a good night, everybody.
I'll see you.